We are talking about, we're going through the armor of God. There's a few people here for the first time. So I just wanted to say to you, we're talking about the armor of God. And we're going through the different parts of the armor. So we've done the belt of truth. We've done the breastplate of righteousness. And today I'm going to be speaking about the shoes and the footwear. So I have a little grandson, and every time, well, I've got a few actually to my collection, but this little one called Lucas, who's running around probably, every time I come to his house, he, if anybody says they're leaving, or if I say, it's time for Judah's nursery, he runs to get shoes, and he really is particular about shoes, and he's always coming. And he thinks if he brings his shoes, then you're going to take him with you, because he just loves to go places. And we're talking about shoes today. And I grew up I had 4 little girls. Hi, Lucas. I had 4 little girls. And the little girls I had, they always wore cloppy shoes. And I used to have all these little fancy cloppy shoes. And I can remember one day, but they didn't just like their shoes, they loved my shoes. And well, it wasn't so much, I didn't really wear high heels, but I went to the charity shops and I got, one year for Christmas, I got a big box and I put in dress-up clothes, but it was like old nighties and ladies' clothes. It wasn't, proper, Disney ones. And I put in necklaces, I'd washed them all and then things like that. And I brought a whole bunch of high-heeled shoes. And they were always, they would get up in the morning and they would decide who they were going to be, and they would clump around outside. And I can remember there was in our house there was a lady. There was a few ladies standing at the gate, and I came out. I was doing something. I was talking to the girls, and they said, "We've just been standing. It's a long time since we've seen little girls with high-heeled shoes just clumping around, pushing prams." And I just loved listening to it, and it just brought them back to a time when they were younger. And today we're going to be talking about shoes, the shoes that we should be wearing as warrior girls. And we all have different kind of shoes. And I was writing down a list of all the shoes that have been in my house. There's sports shoes, formal shoes, comfy shoes, casual, sandals, hot weather shoes, boots, waterproof, work shoes, garden shoes, slippers, all those kinds of shoes that you can think of. I can remember going somewhere for literally 2 days, and when we got there, Ian said to me, "You have taken 3 pairs of shoes, a pair of trainers, and a pair of boots. You're here for 3 days." And I was like, "But I know, but what if you need to go for a walk?" And of course, he only takes 1 pair, and then his pair doesn't do, you see. And I said, "Well, you see, I've got all the different kinds just in case. You're never sure when you need to wear heels or when you need your trainers or when you put your slippers on. We like our shoes." And sports shoes are like that. You have shoes with spikes on them. You have ballet shoes, tap shoes, all these different types of shoes according to what sport you have. And if you are, I feel sorry for my girls because they have lots of boys, and these boys are going to have lots of different kind of shoes, because the shoes you wear for basketball are different from football, are different from rugby, are different from hill walking, are different from golfing, are different from everything. So you have a selection of lots of different shoes. And I can remember many years ago, I was one of these naughty little girls. This is confession time. And I can remember I was about 8 or something at the time, and we were outside, and I had this great idea. With me and my friend, we would run upstairs. I lived in Afghanistan as a little girl, and we ran upstairs to the classroom, and we decided we would run on all the desks. I mean, why would you do that? We ran on all the desks for such a laugh, and our little dirty feet were everywhere. We ran downstairs, and we didn't say anything. And then the teacher came in, and then pulled it. We all lined up. We came upstairs, and we're like, "Oh, look at the mess of the desks." And we were like, "Oh, who's done that?" We just thought this was a great thing, until the teacher said, "Everybody take off your shoe." I had never thought of the next step. I was one of those children who just kind of ran into things and did things, and I never considered the consequences. And I never thought I would get caught because I was a really good little liar, I thought. But we took our shoes off, and of course, they found my footprints, and we got into such trouble. So today we're going to be talking about the footwear we wear as soldiers. And the footwear we wear God-sized shoes. And really, what he wants us to do is to leave our footprints, our spiritual footprints, around the place. And so the verses we're going to be talking about is this one here. In Ephesians 6, verse 15, and I'm going to read it from the New Living Translation. It says, "Wear shoes that are able to speed you on as you preach the good news of peace with God." So these shoes, it's called the shoes, it says in the King James Version, "Shod your feet with the shoes of the gospel of peace." And I thought, what in the world was shodding your feet with that? It never made sense to me. But you know, when you read all the different translations, it starts unpacking what it means. And what it means is you know, you put on the belt of truth. We have the truth. We guard our hearts. We looked about guarding our hearts last week. And this is putting on shoes to walk. And the shoes that they were talking about was the shoes in the Roman army. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. Paul was in a jail, and he was looking at the guards guarding him, and he was looking at all the different pieces of armor, and he was thinking, yeah, and he related all the different bits of armor to the spiritual walk. So when he saw the soldiers' shoes, and they're called caliga, and these shoes were made out of leather, and I don't know if there's a picture up there for it, but there were layers and layers of leather, and then they were glued together, and then they had studs in them. And these studs were on the bottom of them, and then they had laces. So if you can see them there, that's quite a good picture. You see the studs at the bottom, and then they had all these laces. There was air in them, and if you can see them, they were very, very flexible. And so he was looking at this. You can imagine Paul in the cell looking at this and getting a life lesson that he is writing to the church and saying, we need to wear shoes like this. And there was two purposes of these shoes. So the first point is learning to stand. And it says in Corinthians, which is another book that Paul wrote, "Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourself to the work of God." And he's looking at these shoes and thinking there's two characteristics about these shoes. One is stability, and the second is mobility. And the stability of these shoes, because they had studs in them, it meant that they could stand their ground. And when the terrain got rough, they could stand still and they weren't going to fall over. It's like, you know, when you put on football boots or you play rugby, they wear them with spikes because they're playing in rough terrain and they need to stand strong, the rugby players, and not be pushed over. And that's what he's saying about these things. He says, Christians, brothers and sisters, girls, you need to stand strong and get those feet dug in and don't allow anyone to move you. And the second thing he says is, you can see how flexible they are. And he says the second characteristic about these shoes is you need to be able to move. You know, when you look at the army boots that probably the British Army would wear, they're heavy, sturdy boots. I think they weigh a lot and they must have to walk in them. But the terrain that they walked in, they were working in a hot country, so they needed the air to move in and out of them, and they needed the studs. So he's saying, as warriors, as women of God standing against the enemy, you need to have your shoes on. You need to be able to stand strong. But your shoes are for walking. What's that song? These shoes were made for walking, you know? And your shoes are for walking. They're not just to put on. You know, I don't put on my shoes and sit down. I actually have a funny story. I have a friend who bought a pair of Jimmy Choo shoes. I think she's got a real thing about shoes. And I said, do you ever? She goes, oh, I've never worn them. She said, I take them out and I put them on my carpet and I sit with them and I admire them and then I put them back in the box. Not long ago, we were out for a meal together, and over the years, she's put on a lot of weight. And I said, how about those shoes? She goes, they don't even fit me anymore. And I thought, what a shame. She wasted all her money on these shoes that have sat in a box, and she only tried them on and wore them on a carpet. I thought that story just came to my mind. It was quite funny. But anyways, our shoes are meant for walking. Whatever shoes you put on, you consider the journey you're going on, and you put on a certain type of shoes. And he's saying as Christians, you've got these studs, but you put on shoes that you are going to need for the battle ahead. And you need to be they need to be flexible. We need to be flexible. We need to be agile, and we need to move quickly. These are shoes to go. They're shoes to move, and they're shoes. It's an active verb. If you look at the Great Commission in Matthew 28, it says, he tells the disciples to go and to be active and to spread the gospel. So everything is about going. Everything is about advancing. And so these shoes are called the gospel of peace. So that's how we learn to stand and how we learn to put on our shoes. The second thing I wanted to speak about is the gospel of peace. What is the gospel of peace? You know, at Christmas time, I spoke about the Prince of Peace. It says in Isaiah here, Isaiah 9, verse 6, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulders, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Almighty God, the Everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace." So these shoes that we put on, when we put on our Heavenly Father's shoes, we are putting on his character, and his character is the Prince of Peace. So you are a daughter of peace. That lovely song, O Holy Night, it speaks about truly, in verse 2, truly he taught us to love one another. His law is love, and his gospel is peace. Chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother, and in his name all oppression shall flee. And so, you know, there's so much talk at the moment about Nicola Sturgeon resigning, who's going to take her place. Imagine if the person said, well, you know what? The law is going to be love, and my manifesto is going to be peace. Who wouldn't want to vote for them? But yet we have shunned Jesus in our culture. But it's so interesting. Imagine he says that this is what his characteristic is, and this is what he wants us to do. And of all the things that the enemy wants to steal from you, and we've spoken about the devil in a couple of the earlier ones, we've spoken about his characteristics and the enemy that he is, but the thing that he wants to steal from all of us is our peace. That is the greatest thing. If he can get our peace, he's got us. And I just want to say, you know, last week we were speaking about the breastplate of righteousness, which was all about guarding your heart. And it is so important to guard your heart and to protect your heart and to protect your mind. You know, it says in John 14:27, peace I give you, my peace I give you. I don't give you the peace that the world gives. Do not let your heart be troubled, and please do not be afraid, because he gives us supernatural peace. That's what it says in the Bible. This is the kind of peace that Jesus gives us. He promises peace in our life storms. He promises a calmness and tranquility when even your soul, in the worst of circumstances, come. There can be a calmness and a tranquility in your soul. He promises rest from our worries. He promises a peace that is supernatural, a soundness of mind, a forgiveness from your past, and an eternal hope. That is what Jesus offers. But like I said, the greatest thing the enemy wants is to rob you of your peace. And he is out to kill, steal, and destroy your peace. This is what Satan will do. He is the Lord of chaos. He is the master of confusion. He uses opportunities to upset your well-being. He intimidates you. He destabilizes you. You will be brought uneasy with worry and anxiety. He will torment you about your past. He will remind you of your past. He will fill you with worry and give you turmoil and things like that. Ultimately, he wants to steal your peace, because when he steals your peace, he's got your thoughts, and then your focus is off Jesus and it's on to someone else. And that's what his aim is. Always be aware, if you have peace lacking in your life, you know that the enemy is about. Check your heart, check your mind. If you have a lack and you think, I feel unsettled, I feel anxious, something's not right, you know that he's around, and you just speak and just say, You will not get my thought. You will not have my way. You speak it out and you declare. You stand on the word of God. You quote these verses on peace. You know, in the Bible app, you actually can put in something like worry and something like peace. And lots of these verses come up. Just turn on to it and start reading those things, claiming those verses over your life, because it is so, so important to do that. Peace, and I thought this was really interesting if you're taking notes, peace should be the default of every believer. That should be our computer setting. You know, when you go somewhere and sometimes your computer isn't working and they'll take it back to the manufacturer's instructions. When we got saved, when we got the peace of God that surpasses all understanding, when we made our peace with God and we found Jesus at salvation, our default, he gave us this supernatural peace. That peace came upon us. And so that peace is our default for every believer. So when you lose that peace, you know you've lost your focus a little bit. Come back to true north. You know, when they say, when you're all over the shop and you want to find where true north is, your true north as a Christian, as a believer, is to have peace in your heart. Peace that no one else gives. You know, it's interesting nowadays, you know, in 2023, there is such an increase in mental health and everything. There has always been mental health. There's always been anxiety. But over the last few years, we have focused so much on ourselves. We've got so much time to look at, different things that are going on in the world, and you know, so much pleasure, so much entertainment, so many hours. When I look back to my granny's day, you know, she had to get up, she had to go to the shop to buy the food for that day, because they didn't have fridges that kept food, and they made food for that day, and then they had to wash and they had to iron and they had to set water. Her day was so busy. We have so many machines nowadays that do so much for us. You think, wow, you know, you have so much time. What do we do with our time? We focus on ourselves. We focus on entertaining ourselves or looking after ourselves. And sometimes it's not like we're spending any more time with the Lord. If we look back, I'm sure my granny would have snatched some time first thing in the morning with Jesus. I know she did, because she told me. And now, why am I not snatching so much more time when I have so much more time in my hands? But you know, peace has been robbed of us, and we've filled our world with other things, and then those other things come with baggage. Those other things come with burdens and come with, oh, I've got a gym membership. Oh, when am I going to fit that in? I need to go. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the gym membership, but I'm just trying to say, when you do something like that, you have to give it so many hours, and you have to give it so much time. So let's be careful about that. You know, back to our footwear. In the natural, if you do not have shoes and you're walking in the natural, you will have no protection. You know, if you're walking on a sandy beach, it'll be really difficult. If you're walking, if you're walking barefoot in a country where there's insects or spiders or snakes, you have to be really careful, because you need the protection for those little creatures that come in by. You know, or if something falls and it lands on your toes, if you've been running around home barefoot and then suddenly you land and you think, ow, that was really sore. I wish I'd kept my slippers on, you know, and you hurt yourself. Because shoes are there to protect us. Thanks. Shoes are there to protect us and to look after us. If you're going on rough terrain without, you know, you're very careful. You're watching yourself. If you're walking on a sandy beach, you're looking out for the rubbish or the stones or the driftwood and things like that, you know. And if you're wanting to go on a walk, you're not going to put on your heels. We talked about that. And you want to stay strong. So in the natural, we are very good at looking after our shoes and looking after our feet. And you know, if your children, if they're I need to get their feet measured, they're growing again. We're always looking after our natural shoes. But we need to look after our spiritual shoes. Interesting, if you're doing Nicky Gumbel's Through the Day, and I was quickly listening to it this morning, he speaks about Mother Teresa. And Mother Teresa had very gnarled and crooked feet. And the reason she had such awful shaped feet was because when shoes were delivered to the places and the orphanages, she allowed everyone else to pick the shoes that fitted them, and whatever was left over, she put them on. She didn't look after her natural feet. But she was given the Nobel Peace Prize because her life was devoted to peace, devoted to walking in Jesus' shoes and walking out what the gospel would look like in peace. So her natural feet were gnarled and messed up, but her spiritual feet were incredible. And so I thought that was interesting. It just so happened. Isn't it amazing how God does these things for us? But if we're thinking about the spiritual ones, if we don't have our spiritual shoes on, we will not be able to protect ourselves against the fiery darts. If we have lost our peace, that's because we don't have our shoes on. We haven't got up in the morning and said, Lord, I want my peace today. You promised me you would give me your supernatural portion of peace, and I'm looking for you to give that to me today. If we're injured or crippled because we have isolated ourselves from connect groups and coming to church and got very busy, we then become isolated from people, and then we become very injured spiritually. And so when you're injured physically, you can't actually wear certain shoes. But spiritually, you can't put on those shoes of the gospel of peace if you're walking around, if you're going around and you've isolated yourself, and I've heard people say, it's just not working for me anymore. And I'm thinking, well, when were you last at the prayer meeting? When were you last at a Bible study? When did you last pick up your Bible? Oh, I just don't have time. I find it difficult. I find it boring. And we make excuses for ourselves. And then we suddenly realize we need to actually get back to the basics. Lord, today is a new day. I'm going to put on my footwear of peace, and you're going to help me work out and walk out in this. And so it's really important. Remember, shoes, I said, are for walking. Walking is when you take ground. And so when you're walking, you're taking ground. Sometimes you can't take ground. You're just standing firm, and you're just standing, because sometimes to stand is actually taking ground. When you're standing firm, you are taking ground. And then when you're able to, you start walking it out, because that's what shoes are for. Shoes are meant to walk. Shoes are meant to walk into your world. The shoes that we are offered and commanded to wear are God-sized, and they can leave footprints of peace wherever we walk. What footprints are you leaving in your work? What footprints are you leaving with your neighbors? What footprints are you leaving in your world that people go, they've arrived. There's just such a sense of peace when they come here. I'm not going to hear unkind things. I'm not going to hear gossip. It's this person has walked in and there's just a different atmosphere created. God's peace can leave your mind and body stabilized and your relationships intact. Are you struggling with some relationships and you're anxious about different things and your peace is gone? Just think, God, you promised that you can do this for me, and so I'm going to claim that promise. And the last one I wanted to mention before moving on to my third point is when we put on the shoes of peace and walk into a situation because he is living with us, we are bringing his peace into that situation. How many times have you walked in and the atmosphere is a bit tense and you think, and you don't know to crack a joke or what to say, but just being kind and just changing the subject and doing something, you actually can change the atmosphere. And that atmosphere has a huge, huge impact. And I think girls, Leanne spoke on it a couple of weeks ago. We are great relationally, and we love to get together and talk. It's very rarely do you have to say, okay, women, you've got 15 minutes to talk to each other. We don't need to be encouraged to talk, right? But what we do need to be encouraged to do is to say kind things, to put gossip aside and not walk into places and hear things and start repeating things. We need to be careful that our footprints are peace and our footprints are gospel. Oh, here she comes. Let's ask her the questions. She'll know the latest things. She'll know what's happening. And then they get our bent. And, it's very easy. I'm tempted many, many times, because I have a very good friend and she's in management. And so she'll often share things with me. And I'll sometimes come into a room and they'll say, so what's the latest? What's happened? And I have to really guard myself and be careful to not say things because that's not my place. But also, I need to remember that I am Jesus in his shoes, in my place of work first, before I'm anything else. The third thing is we are called to be peacemakers. And a peacemaker is what most parents, there's a difference between a peacekeeper and a peacemaker. We're called to be peacemakers, and I've spoken about this before. A peacekeeper is every mother on this planet. You go into a situation, the kids are arguing, and you are trying to keep peace. And you're saying, okay, this, and you end up negotiating, you end up compromising, you end up doing all sorts of things to keep the peace. You say one thing to one child, and then you don't say the same. You know, like, if you're really good, I'll do this for you. And then you say the same, a different thing here, and you say one. It doesn't work. You know, that's why peacekeeping force, like the UN that goes into a country to keep two fractions apart, they make lots of compromises and it never ends up being a lasting peace. We are called to be peacemakers. A peacemaker, a dictionary meaning for peacemaker is someone who reconciles people with God and to each other. A peacemaker takes the initiative to get involved in conflicts with, not the intention of hearing gossip, okay? The peacemaker gets involved in conflicts with the intention of building bridges between the parties at odds. How would this world look like if we kept that uppermost in our minds? Since peace lives within me, I can establish peace around me. Okay, if you want to write that down. Since peace lives within me, since Jesus lives within me, I can establish peace around me. You are responsible for the atmosphere around you. You can't be responsible for their atmosphere, but you can be responsible for your atmosphere. Okay? So there's two different kinds of peace. There's a peace with God that comes on us as soon as we're saved. We get the peace of, we're made peace with God. We make our peace with God and we find Jesus. But there's a peace of God that is his gift to us. So we make our peace with God and we're saved. Yep, I'm saved. I got my peace with God. And then he gives us his supernatural peace. And we have the peace of God on us. Do you understand the two differences? And so when his presence and his peace comes on us, we can outwork that and we can do things with it. In Philippians it says, don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God your needs and don't forget to thank him for his answers. If you do this, you will experience God's peace. Now you see, it came not just asking him for things, but it says when you express your thanks. So keep a tender, thankful heart, because a tender, thankful heart will allow you to activate God's peace and God's presence in your life. And I just wanted to say, with the different things that happen in your world, and I'm going to be finishing soon, with the different things that happen to us in your world, it says in John, you will have trouble. You will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. So he's already said you are going to have problems. You will have disappointments. Things will fall apart. You will get bad diagnosis. We're all going to die, okay? One day we're all going to die. So we know that. So there will be all sorts of trouble. Before we die, there will be all sorts of problems, all sorts of heartache. But Jesus says, I have overcome the world and it's going to be okay. I have actually found a way. And I just want to say three things to you about peace. Jesus will either take you out of the storm, okay? Moses was a little baby and Jesus provided a place for him to be removed from the situation and he was placed into Pharaoh's palace. So Jesus allowed for him to be taken out. Many babies were not taken out of the storm, but God sometimes will take you out of the storm. So that's one option. He sometimes will remove you from the storm. The second thing is, he might allow the storm to rage about you and he might just calm you in the storm. And I was thinking about John the Baptist. All of the little boys under the age of 2 were going to be killed. Jesus and his mom and dad, they went down to Egypt The Lord removed him out of the storm, and he stayed there until it was over for 5 years. But the Lord protected John the Baptist and his mom and dad in the storm. Isn't that interesting? I hadn't thought of that before. So, God sometimes takes you out, but sometimes he allows you to stay in that storm. I don't know where they lived. I can't wait to find out. I was reading up about it, and they say that they lived in the desert and they went and lived in a cave to protect him. God allowed John the Baptist to live there the whole time, and Herod had his reign. He killed people, but John's life was protected and saved because God kept him safe in the storm. When the disciples were down there, God kept them safe in the storm. So sometimes he calms you in the storm and lets it rage around you. And sometimes he comes to you and he supernaturally calms the storm. Like the disciples, they were in the storm, they were fearful and worried, and he came in and he spoke peace over them, and he calmed the storm, and it went. So there's 3 different options, okay? He can calm you in the storm, he can remove you from the storm, or he can calm the storm. There's 3 different things, but each time there is a peace that he will give you in the storm that you face in life. So in conclusion, these shoes of peace, we have the opportunity to walk into our world and to walk in with the peace of God. We have to walk in with the gospel. So the gospel is good news. And it says in Isaiah 52 verse 7, how beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news. That's our shoes, okay? This was written 500 years, 600 years before Paul was writing this in his cell. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him that bring good news, who publishes peace and who brings news of happiness and publishes salvation, who says, your God reigns. That is a verse written 500 years before Paul wrote his words. And it's saying, how wonderful are the feet that bring good news. We are the feet that bring good news. Okay, so just before, I'm going to do something slightly different today, because this song has been on my heart so much. And if you want to join in and sing, that's fine. But I just thought I'd invite Darlene Check here, and she's going to sing to us. And I think the podcast will probably finish here. But if you're watching this back, why don't you Google this song we're going to play just now, Darlene Check's one, Jesus in the Street. And I want us to imagine we have got our shoes on, and we are going to walk into our world with these gospel of shoes on, these shoes that are flexible, these shoes that are there to spread peace wherever we go. And we're going to listen to this song that Darlene is going to sing, and then there's going to be some questions on to talk around your book, your tables and that, okay?